My name is Caroline Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, and I live alone in a small red brick house on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin. When people hear alone, they often tilt their head and give me that soft, pitying look, as if solitude must be some kind of tragedy. For me, solitude became a choice one I made after life gave me no better option. 7 years ago, I buried my husband, John. He was my steady anchor in a world that often felt chaotic. John was a quiet man, good with his hands and even better with his heart. He worked as a high school shop teacher for 32 years, teaching teenagers how to fix more than just broken wood or bent metal. He taught them patience, focus, and how to believe they could create something out of nothing. He used to joke that he could fix just about anything except bad manners. I suppose that's why I'm telling this story, because lately, I've seen more bad manners than kindness from people I once thought were my whole world. When John died, I thought I'd never breathe properly again. We had been married for 41 years of routine, arguments about who forgot to take out the trash, late-night ice cream runs, and all the quiet moments in between. Suddenly, I went from we to I, and everything felt wrong. The bed was too big, the house too quiet, the mornings too long. But somehow, life pushed me forward. At first, I stumbled through it. Burnt dinners for one. Empty coffee cups on the counter because I'd make two by habit. Leaving one untouched. Slowly, the ache dulled, though it never left completely. I created my own rhythm. Wake up with the sun. Brew coffee just the way I like it. Sit by the front window where light hits the hardwood floor just right, and listen to the world wake up outside. By 9, I'd have finished my crossword puzzle. At noon, I'd usually go for a short walk, then spend afternoons on hobbies, sewing, reading, watching old documentaries, or trying new recipes I'd find online. In the evenings, I'd watch the local news at 6, maybe one episode of something light. The Great British Bake Off is my guilty pleasure, then call it a night by 9. There's comfort in rhythm, even when it's quiet enough to hear your own breath. I thought I was doing okay, at least until I realized how rarely my phone rang anymore. My son, Ethan, had always been my pride. He was bright, responsible, the kind of kid who saved up his allowance to buy me flowers for Mother's Day when he was 12. After college, he married Sophie, and they built a life in Nashville, Tennessee, about 10 hours south of me. At first, we kept in touch. Sunday calls, occasional visits, sweet little FaceTimes with my grandkids. But slowly, those calls became less frequent, the visits fewer, and the smiles over the phone felt strained. I'd offer to come down, but there was always some reason. Work deadlines, the kids' sports schedules, house projects. I didn't push. I didn't want to be that mother who intrudes, so I pulled back, thinking space was what they wanted. The last real conversation Ethan and I had was over a year ago. After that, it was just the obligatory texts. Happy birthday, Mom. Thanks for the card, Mom. Kids say hi. I got one Halloween picture of the kids dressed as astronauts. That was it. It wasn't always like this. After John's funeral, Ethan had come to stay with me for a week. He cooked dinner, fixed the leaky sink, and sat with me on the porch while I cried. Back then, I thought he would keep checking in, but Sophie was already pulling away even then. She was polite, always polite, but there was a coldness in her eyes, like I was a guest at their table rather than family. One Christmas, 4 years ago, I made the drive down to Nashville with 3 pies and gifts for everyone, thinking it would be like old times. Instead, I spent most of that night sitting in the corner while Sophie talked to her friends on speakerphone, barely acknowledging me. Ethan tried to smooth things over with small talk, but it was obvious I didn't fit anymore. When it came time to hand out gifts, they went around the room, Sophie, Ethan, the kids, and skipped me entirely. No one noticed. Not even Ethan. The next morning, I quietly packed my things and left before sunrise. I didn't call or text. I didn't know how to explain how much it hurt to feel like a ghost in my own son's house. That was the day I stopped chasing after their attention. The truth is, the silence hurt, but it also gave me space I hadn't had in decades. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I wandered the house, looking at old pictures, asking myself the same question every widowed mother probably asks. Why wasn't I enough? But over time, something shifted. I realized I could either sit by the window waiting for phone calls that might never come, or I could do something. Anything. I had always loved writing journals, short stories, even long-winded Facebook posts that only my old high school friends read. So, I decided to start learning about blogs. It started with free YouTube tutorials, how to set up a WordPress site, how to use Canva, how to write posts that people actually read. I took notes in a blue spiral notebook like a college student. Every day, I'd spend an hour learning something new. Then it became 2, then 3. I bought a cheap course designed for seniors starting online businesses. $27. I watched every video 3 times, pausing and rewinding to make sure I understood terms like SEO and affiliate links. I called my little site Second Chapter Stories. I wrote about things I knew firsthand. Grief, aging, rebuilding your life after loss, cooking for one, budgeting on retirement income, even tips on finding joy in solitude. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but they did. At first, it was 10 people. Then 50. Then 500. Women started leaving comments. You put into words what I couldn't say. This made me feel less alone. Some told me my posts helped them through dark nights after losing their husbands, too. That was when I realized this wasn't just a hobby. It was a lifeline. Not just for me, but for others. So I leaned in. I learned how to create printable journals and sell them on Etsy. Simple things. Gratitude logs, memory books, meal planners. They sold. I published my first short ebook about navigating widowhood and, to my shock, it sold more than 1,500 copies in 3 months. One week, I earned $400, more than I'd ever imagined from something I built alone in my pajamas. It became my secret world, a place where I wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't tell Ethan or Sophie about it, partly because I didn't want their judgment, partly because I liked having something that was just mine. And then, this December, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my usual spot by the window, the morning sun stretching across the hardwood floor, a cup of coffee warming my hands, when the phone rang. The caller ID made me pause. Sophie. For a second, I thought it was a wrong number. She hadn't called me in years. Hello? I answered cautiously. Hi, Caroline. It's Sophie. Her voice was bright, cheerful in that slightly too practiced way. Oh, Sophie. I know this is kind of sudden, but Ethan and I were talking, and we wanted to invite you to Nashville for Christmas this year. The kids will be home and, well, it's time we all got together again. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes drifted out the window, to the dogwood tree in my front yard, its bare branches tapping against the glass. I hadn't been invited to anything in 4 years, not even my granddaughter's high school graduation. Well, I said slowly, that's unexpected. I know, Sophie said quickly. But the kids have been asking about you, and Ethan thought, well, it's time. Time for what? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I forced a smile into my voice. Okay. I'll think about it. Great, we'd love to see you. After we hung up, I just stared at the phone for a long while. Why now? Why this year? I could feel that old ache rising, the one that whispers, why wasn't I enough? But then, another voice, steadier and stronger, answered back, they don't know who you've become these past few years. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they did. I sat at the kitchen table long after Sophie hung up, the phone still warm in my hand, like it was holding on to the shock for me. Christmas in Nashville, with Ethan and Sophie and the grandkids I hadn't really seen in years. I didn't even know how to feel. I put the phone down and stared out the window again. The sky was pale gray, and snow flurries danced in the wind. It had been quiet here all week, just me, the ticking wall clock, and the occasional car rolling by. That silence was safe, predictable. A trip to Nashville? That was the opposite of everything I'd built for myself these past few years. Still, something about Sophie's voice clung to me. She had sounded cheerful, but in that brittle, too-practiced way. It wasn't warm cheer, the kind that comes from genuine excitement. It was the kind of cheer you put on when there's something else underneath, something you don't want people to see. For years, I had convinced myself I didn't need to be part of their holidays anymore. I'd stopped hoping for phone calls, for invitations, for gifts with my name on them under their tree. I told myself, "You're fine, Caroline. You've built a new life. You don't need them to remember you." And it was true. Mostly. But that invitation cracked something open. A small, dangerous thing called hope. I stood and walked down the hall to my bedroom. In the bottom drawer of my nightstand was a thick, sealed envelope. I pulled it out, ran my fingers over the label. Second Chapter Company. Q4 Performance Report. This was the thing no one in my family knew about. While they had been forgetting to call, I had built something. A thriving online business, a newsletter with tens of thousands of subscribers, and an Etsy shop that shipped products to every state in the country. I hadn't told Ethan or Sophie a word about it. Part of me had been scared they'd treat it the same way they treated everything I'd ever been proud of, politely dismissing it, turning it into something small. But another part of me liked having something private, something entirely mine. And now, with this invitation, I had a choice. I could go to Nashville, sit quietly at the edge of the couch again, let them forget me all over again. Or I could show them who I had become. I smiled, just a little. This Christmas was going to be different. The next morning, I called Sophie back. "Hi, Sophie, it's Caroline. I wanted to let you know I'll come for Christmas." She sounded almost relieved. "Oh, wonderful. The kids will be so happy. I'm looking forward to it." We exchanged a few polite words, what time I'd arrive, how long I'd stay before hanging up. Afterward, I sat in the quiet for a while. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down. I couldn't tell if it was excitement or nerves. Probably both. I opened my laptop and pulled up my to-do list. I'd need to pack clothes, prepare gifts, water the plants, and set up an autoresponder for my business emails. The last one made me pause. Business emails. How strange that sounded. Even after 2 years. There was a time when I didn't even know how to schedule an email, let alone manage customer orders, troubleshoot downloads, or send weekly newsletters to an audience of people who actually wanted to hear from me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting gratitude wash over me. This life I'd built quiet, yes, but full of meaning was something no one could take away. That afternoon, I went out to shop for gifts. Not expensive things, just thoughtful ones. I wanted to show them that, despite everything, I still cared. For Sophie, I chose a kitchen set in the soft sage green she'd posted about on Instagram last month. For Ethan, a beautiful leather-bound notebook with gold-trimmed pages. I remembered how he used to love sketching as a teenager. For the kids, I picked a scented candle for my granddaughter, who was in her artsy phase, and a personalized gaming headset for my grandson, who practically lived in front of a screen. At the checkout counter, I felt something strange. Calm. A few years ago, buying gifts for them would have filled me with anxiety. Worrying if they'd like them. Worrying if it would even matter. But now, these gifts were an extension of who I was, not an attempt to buy affection. On my way home, snow began to fall in heavier sheets, blanketing the streets. Christmas lights glimmered on houses, little sparks of warmth in the cold. For the first time in a long time, I actually felt ready. The days leading up to Christmas blurred with preparation. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet, checked the tires on my car, and scheduled someone from my neighborhood to shovel the driveway while I was gone. I packed clothes, nothing fancy, just warm sweaters, slacks, and a soft gray coat. I made sure to bring the envelope with my quarterly report. Not because I planned to flaunt it, but because I knew myself. If things went the way they had before, if they forgot me again, I wasn't going to shrink this time. I was going to stand my ground and, if necessary, remind them I was worth remembering. The night before the trip, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by the window one last time. The house was warm. The quiet, comforting. I'd grown to love this space, every corner filled with little things that mattered to me. Photos of John, shelves of books I'd collected over decades. A small desk where I built a life no one else had seen yet. I touched the edge of the envelope on the coffee table. "Time to tell your story," I whispered. I left early the next morning, long before sunrise. The car packed neatly with one suitcase, one handbag, and the small basket of wrapped gifts. The highway was mostly empty, just a few trucks hauling through the dark. I turned on the radio soft jazz, something John used to hum along to. For 6 hours, I drove through snow-dusted farmland, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The silence after John's death, the painful withdrawal of Ethan and Sophie, the birthday they forgot entirely, and the quiet, determined rebuilding I had done since. This trip wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about closure and maybe, just maybe, connection. When I finally pulled into their driveway, I had to stop for a moment. The house was bigger than I remembered. A newly painted white brick exterior with sharp black shutters and a sleek modern door. 2 shiny SUVs sat in the driveway, one with dealer plates still on it. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding. "Okay, Caroline," I whispered. "You can do this." I stepped out into the crisp Nashville air, coat pulled tight, gifts in one hand and my purse in the other. The front door swung open before I could ring the bell. "Caroline, you made it!" Sophie's voice was high-pitched, a little too enthusiastic. She gave me a quick, perfunctory hug that barely touched me, her citrusy perfume strong enough to make me blink. "Hi, Sophie. Thank you for inviting me." "Of course, come on in." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Everything was spotless, magazine perfect. Silver and white ornaments on the tree, matching stockings by the fireplace, and even the furniture positioned like it was staged for a photo shoot. "Ethan, your mom's here," Sophie called. Ethan appeared from the hallway, phone in hand, thumb still moving as he typed something. "Hey, Mom." He gave me a one-armed hug, eyes already drifting back to the screen. "It's good to see you, Ethan." "Yeah, you too. Glad you made it down safe." I smiled, though something in my chest felt heavy. The kids were on the couch, faces buried in tablets. I waved. "Hi, sweethearts." A murmur of "hey" came back without them looking up. Sophie led me upstairs to a small guest room. The bedding was faded, the dresser a little dusty, and the ceiling light flickered when I switched it on. It felt like an afterthought, but I smiled politely. "This is great, thank you. If you need anything, let me know," Sophie said, already halfway out the door. I unpacked slowly, placing the gifts in the corner, lining my shoes neatly under the bed. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of the mattress, hands clasped. I'd known this might be awkward, but somehow it still stung. That evening, we had dinner together. Sophie had prepared a fancy meal roast duck with cherry glaze and a quinoa salad with pomegranate seeds. There were name cards at the table. Mine was at the far end, near the serving cart. The conversation moved quickly, mostly between Sophie and Ethan. About his job, her company's marketing numbers, the kids' school activities. Every now and then, one of them would glance at me and offer a polite nod, but no one really asked how I had been. Midway through dinner, Sophie looked at me. "So, Caroline, what are you up to these days? Still into those little retirement hobbies?" She said it with a laugh that made the room chuckle. Even Ethan smiled. I sipped my tea slowly, feeling the weight of every eye on me. "Something like that," I said, leaving it at that. Sophie nodded, already turning back to the others. I chewed slowly, listening. They still thought I was just a lonely old woman with too much time on her hands. They had no idea. And I decided, right there, they were going to find out. That night, lying in the guest bed. I couldn't sleep. The ceiling light above me still flickered faintly, like a weak heartbeat, and every creak of the house reminded me that I was a visitor here, not family. It wasn't the unfamiliar mattress or the thin sheets that kept me awake, it was the quiet sting in my chest. I thought about all the times I had tried, really tried, to stay connected after John died. I had invited them up for Thanksgiving one year, promising to cook Ethan's favorite maple-glazed ham and Sophie's beloved sweet potato casserole. They politely declined the kids have sports that weekend. Another year, I suggested a summer trip to Door County, one of Ethan's favorite childhood vacation spots. Sophie's answer? Too busy with work projects. Each time I heard no, I tried to convince myself it was just bad timing. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted between us. The worst was my 70th birthday. I didn't expect balloons or a big party, just a phone call, maybe a card. I waited all day. Checked the mailbox 3 times. By 6 o'clock, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and cried harder than I had in years, not because I needed gifts or cake, but because I realized something heavy and final. I was no longer part of their lives. That night changed me. I stopped calling, stopped pushing, and for the first time in decades, I asked myself, if I don't have to take care of anyone else, what do I do now? The answer came slowly. I started journaling again, then taking online classes, then starting a blog. It was awkward at first, me, a woman in her late 60s, trying to figure out things like landing pages and social media algorithms. But there was power in it too. I wasn't just filling time, I was building something new. I called my blog Second Chapter Stories because that's what it felt like. A second chapter of life I never planned to write. I wrote about grief, about rebuilding, about cooking for one without feeling lonely, about budgeting on retirement income, about small joys like growing herbs on a windowsill. At first, it felt silly, like I was just shouting into the void. But then people started reading, commenting, emailing me about how something I wrote helped them through their own tough moments. One widow from Kansas wrote, "You said what I couldn't say out loud. Thank you." Another woman from Oregon emailed, "I thought I was the only one feeling this invisible at 65. You made me feel seen." Those messages kept me going, kept me learning. I added printable journals, guides, and eventually small ebooks, one called After the Funeral, Finding Yourself Again, that sold more copies than I imagined possible. By the end of that first year, I was making more money from my hobby than I'd made in my last part-time job. And I didn't stop there. I reinvested in better tools, hired a young web designer to redesign my site, and even learned how to run an email newsletter, which now had more than 85,000 subscribers. It was quiet success. No fanfare, no recognition at least, not from the people who once mattered most. And now here I was, lying in a bed in my son's house, being treated like an afterthought again. I stared at the ceiling and let out a slow breath. They don't know who you are now, I whispered to myself. But they're about to. The next morning, I woke early as usual. The house was still silent. Sophie and Ethan were sleeping in, and the kids' doors were closed. I got dressed, made the bed, and went downstairs to make myself a cup of tea. When Sophie came into the kitchen, she looked surprised to see me up and about. "Oh, Caroline, you didn't have to make your own tea. I was going to make coffee for everyone." "That's all right," I said. "Old habits die hard." She smiled politely, but her eyes flicked toward the counter like she was making sure I hadn't touched anything important. That same look I'd seen years ago when I'd brought over food and she had pushed it aside with, "Oh, we're doing more plant-based now." I sat quietly at the small breakfast table, sipping tea while she bustled around. She was efficient. Polished, her matching workout outfit probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. When Ethan joined us, he was already scrolling through his phone, answering work emails. "Morning, Mom," he said without looking up. "Morning, sweetheart." He nodded absently and sat down, muttering something about a client issue. It hit me then. In this house, I wasn't really seen. I was background noise, a polite obligation. But not for long. Later that day, I took a quiet walk outside, needing space. The Nashville air was crisp, a little warmer than Wisconsin, but still winter cold enough to redden my cheeks. As I walked, I thought about John. How he would have hated this distance between Ethan and me. He always used to say, "Family is like an engine, Caroline. Every part has to work together or it breaks down." Well, ours had broken down. And for years, I thought it was because of me that I had done something wrong. But building my own life taught me otherwise. Sometimes people drift away not because you're broken, but because they can't or won't make space for you anymore. And yet, here I was, about to spend Christmas in this house. Why? Because I wasn't running from it anymore. When I got back, Sophie was wrapping presents. Perfectly coordinated wrapping paper, matching tags, silver bows. It looked like a department store display. She glanced at the small stack of gifts I had brought, wrapped simply in red paper. "Oh, you didn't have to do that," she said, her tone light but dismissive. "I wanted to." I smiled. "It's Christmas." She nodded and went back to her bows, humming to herself. In that moment, I knew something. Tomorrow would be the test. Christmas morning, with all its chaos and joy and, most likely, the same old oversight. If history repeated itself, if there was no gift for me again, then I'd do what I hadn't done last time. I'd speak. And not just speak. I'd show them. That night, I opened my suitcase and pulled out the thick envelope marked Second Chapter Company, Q4 Performance Report. I placed it carefully on the dresser, alongside a small key. The key to my new downtown condo in Madison, a place I'd bought just last week, fully paid for with my business earnings. I smiled, running my fingers over the cool metal. They think I'm just an old woman with retirement hobbies. Not anymore. I woke up before the sun, as I always did. But this morning I felt different. The guest room was still chilly, the thin blanket barely keeping out the draft from the old window. But I didn't mind. I had slept with the envelope of business reports under my pillow like a secret weapon, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt steady. I dressed quietly in black slacks and a soft gray sweater, then slipped on the gold hoop earrings I hadn't worn since John's funeral. They made me feel prepared, somehow. Downstairs, the house was already stirring. Sophie was moving around in her matching red and white pajama set, giving instructions like a foreman on a construction site. Ethan poured orange juice, still glued to his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. The kids buzzed with excitement, darting in and out of the room, chanting, "Is it time yet? Can we open them now?" Sophie clapped her hands together. Okay, everyone to the living room." The Christmas tree stood tall and perfect in the corner, decorated like something out of a magazine. White lights, silver ornaments, a flawless angel perched on top. Beneath it, dozens of presents were stacked in neat piles, color-coordinated bows glimmering under the lights. We gathered around. The kids practically bounced on their toes. Ethan smiled at them, then at Sophie, who nodded like an actress hitting her cue. "Okay, kids first," she said. "Go for it." Wrapping paper flew. Shouts of, "Oh my gosh," and "Thank you, Mom," filled the room. My granddaughter unwrapped a brand new MacBook, hugging her father as if he had given her the moon. My grandson got a gaming console with all the bells and whistles. He cheered so loudly the dog barked from upstairs. Sophie opened a big box from Ethan, a designer handbag she had obviously chosen herself, and gave him a staged kiss for the family photo. Ethan smiled sheepishly, already checking his phone again. It was cheerful, chaotic, picture-perfect. Until Sophie stopped and scanned the pile. "Wait," she said, her voice high and light. "Did we forget one?" Her eyes darted to me, then back to Ethan. He cleared his throat and looked down at his coffee. My granddaughter opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then quickly shut it. Sophie laughed nervously. "Oh no, Caroline. I must have forgotten to add yours to the pile. With everything going on this year, I Well, you know how it is. A soft chuckle rolled through the room. Even my grandson joked. Granny's used to it, before going back to fiddling with his new controller. The laughter wasn't mean, not outright, but it cut just the same. I smiled, sipping my tea. My hands were steady. My heart, surprisingly, was too. Actually, I said, my voice calm, even light. I brought myself something this year. The room quieted. Sophie tilted her head, still smiling like she wasn't sure if this was a joke. Oh, that's nice. I reached into my handbag, pulled out the thick envelope, and laid it gently on the coffee table. What's that? Ethan asked. Something I wanted to share, I said, sliding it toward him. It's the performance report for my business. Your business? Sophie echoed, blinking. I nodded. Yes. Second Chapter Company. You know that little blog I started a while back? It's not so little anymore. They exchanged confused glances. My granddaughter leaned forward, curious. Ethan hesitated, then opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the pages, slowing as he reached the financial summary. Wait. He blinked. You made this much? In 3 months? $38,000 after expenses, I said, still calm. Sometimes more. The room was silent now, except for the soft hum of the Christmas lights. You did this? Sophie asked. Her tone caught between disbelief and something else I couldn't quite name. Yes, I built it myself, learned everything online. I write for over 85,000 subscribers now, and I sell digital journals and ebooks mostly for women over 60 navigating big life changes. My granddaughter's eyes were wide. You have 85,000 people reading your stuff? Every week, I said, smiling at her. And some months, more than that. Sophie crossed her arms. And you? Never mentioned this to us? I held her gaze. You never asked. No one spoke. Even the kids had set their gadgets down, staring at me like I'd suddenly grown wings. And one more thing, I said, pulling out the small silver key I'd placed in my coat pocket. This is for my new condo downtown Madison. 2-bedroom, all paid for. Closed last week. Ethan's eyes widened. Sophie's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I slipped the key back into my pocket and sat down again, sipping my tea like I had just commented on the weather. Wow, Ethan finally said. Mom, I didn't know you were doing all this. You wouldn't, I replied gently. You haven't really been in touch. He flinched slightly, looking down at his hands. Sophie shifted in her seat, silent now. My granddaughter broke the pause. Granny, that's amazing. Like, you're famous. I smiled at her warmth. Not famous, sweetheart. Just busy. Doing something I love. The room stayed quiet after that. No more laughter, no more small jokes. The dynamic had shifted, and we all felt it. For years, I'd been treated like background noise, like an obligation. Today, I'd reminded them without anger or shouting that I was more than they ever gave me credit for. And it felt good. Breakfast afterward was awkward but quieter, more careful. Sophie asked a few polite questions about how online businesses work, but her tone was cautious, like she wasn't sure what to do with this version of me. Ethan, to his credit, seemed genuinely interested. He kept looking at the report like he couldn't quite believe it. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and once seen, it couldn't be unseen. Later, while everyone retreated to their rooms to tinker with their new gifts, I stayed by the tree, sipping another cup of tea. I watched the light bounce off the silver ornaments and thought about the Christmas 4 years ago when I left this house in tears. Not this year. This year, I left with something I hadn't had back then. Peace. The rest of Christmas morning moved in slow motion. After the gift exchange, everyone scattered. My grandson disappeared to his room, already wearing his new gaming headset, and my granddaughter curled up on the sofa scrolling through her new laptop like she'd owned it for years. I sat in the armchair near the window, tea warming my hands. From here, I could see Sophie and Ethan whispering in the kitchen, their voices low, but sharp in tone. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught fragments. How did we not know? That kind of money. Should have told us. It was strange. A few hours earlier, I'd been invisible in this house. Now, suddenly, I was something else. Ethan walked back into the living room, holding the packet of reports like it was some rare artifact. He looked at me, then at Sophie, who followed close behind. "Mom," he started, his voice softer than usual. "This is really impressive. I mean, really impressive. I had no idea you were doing all of this." I smiled faintly. "I didn't expect you to know, Ethan. You've been busy." His eyes darted to Sophie for a moment. She gave a tight smile before jumping in. "Caroline, what you've built. It's incredible. Honestly, it's inspiring. And, well," she hesitated, her voice taking on that practiced cheer again. "We've been talking and we thought maybe we could help you. Expand." "Expand?" I asked. "Yes," Ethan said, warming to the idea. "With our network, we could scale this. Add new products. Get professional marketing involved. You've already got an audience. With some investment, it could grow fast. You wouldn't have to do it all on your own anymore." I sipped my tea, letting the silence stretch a little before I answered. "I appreciate the offer. But no." They blinked. "No?" Sophie repeated, like she'd misheard me. "That's right, no thank you." Sophie tilted her head, her smile faltering. "But why not? I mean, we're family. We could work together, make this something huge." I met her eyes. "Sophie, when I called you after John died, you let it ring 3 times before you picked up. And then you told me you didn't have the bandwidth to come to the funeral reception. When I asked about visiting, there was always a reason I couldn't. And when I came here 4 years ago with gifts and pies, I sat in the corner like a stranger. That night, not one person gave me a gift or even said thank you for being here. Do you remember that?" Her face froze, and for a moment she didn't speak. "This business," I continued, "was born from that silence. From all the hours I spent wondering why I wasn't enough for my own family. I built it alone, and I love it that way. It's mine. It's me." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, we didn't realize." "No, you didn't," I said gently but firmly. "And I'm not angry. I'm just clear now. I don't need a partner, not even family, to validate what I've built. It's already enough." The room was quiet except for the hum of the fireplace. Sophie folded her arms, clearly uncomfortable. Ethan sat down slowly across from me. "So you really did all this yourself?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Every bit. I taught myself from scratch, email lists, product design, social media. I hired people when I needed to, invested where it mattered, and I've been profitable every quarter for 2 years straight." My granddaughter peeked over her laptop, her eyes shining. "Granny, can I intern with you next summer? I've been learning digital design and, well, I think what you do is cool." My heart warmed, and I smiled at her. "I'd love that, sweetheart. We'll make it happen." Sophie opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. The mood shifted after that. Breakfast was eaten in near silence, the easy chatter of earlier replaced by something heavier reflection, maybe even guilt. Ethan tried again as I set my cup in the sink. "Mom, I'm proud of you. I hope you know that." I nodded. "Thank you. That means a lot." But I could see it in their eyes. This wasn't about pride. It was about surprise and opportunity. They saw numbers now, not just me, and I wasn't about to let them turn my life's quiet work into their next side project. The rest of the day passed slowly. The kids retreated to their rooms. Sophie busied herself in the kitchen, and Ethan disappeared into his office for a quick call that lasted an hour. I stayed in the living room, quietly reading messages from my subscribers on my phone. Women thanking me for that Christmas Eve post I had published, telling me how it had given them hope. Each message reminded me, this is who I am now, and I don't need their permission to keep being her. That evening, Sophie approached me in the guest room doorway. Her tone was softer now, almost hesitant. Caroline, I'm sorry. For before. For, the years we didn't call. I looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for saying that. I didn't realize how lonely you must have felt, she continued. I guess I thought you were fine. I was fine, I said. Eventually. Because I stopped waiting for someone else to make me feel like I mattered. She swallowed hard, then smiled faintly. Well, if you ever want to collaborate, the offer still stands. I shook my head gently. Sophie, what I built isn't about growth charts or revenue. It's about women like me, like the woman I was when you all stopped calling. It's about showing them they don't have to wait for permission to start again. I can't compromise that. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly, before she nodded and stepped back. Okay. Later that night, I packed my suitcase slowly. Tomorrow I'd drive home. Not sad. Not angry. Just done. I had shown them who I was now, and I had no regrets. Before bed, my granddaughter knocked softly. She stepped in, clutching the gift card I'd slipped into her hoodie earlier. Granny, she whispered. Thank you. For all of this. You've always been the coolest one in this house. Even when they acted like you weren't. I hugged her long and warm. You don't know how much that means to me. When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, smiling at the key to my condo resting on the nightstand. This trip hadn't given me the family warmth I'd secretly hoped for, but it had given me something better, clarity. The morning after Christmas felt heavier than the day before. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the emotional shift no one dared name out loud. I woke early, as usual, and packed my suitcase. Every folded sweater felt like closure. One piece of this trip I could tuck away, seal up, and take home. I zipped it shut, set it by the door, and took one last look around the guest room. It was the same as when I'd arrived, flickering ceiling light, dusty dresser, thin bedding. But I felt different. Downstairs, the house was still asleep. I brewed tea and sat in the armchair near the tree, its light still glowing faintly. Gifts from yesterday were stacked neatly, their shiny ribbons already slightly crumpled. I stared at them for a while, remembering the empty space where my name should have been. And then I smiled. Because I had filled that space myself. By 8, the house stirred. Ethan came down first, hair messy, still holding his phone like it was an extra limb. Morning, Mom. You're up early again. Habit, I said, sipping my tea. His eyes flicked to my suitcase by the door. You're heading out already? Yes, I've got something to finish back home today. My readers are expecting a post. There was a flicker of surprise on his face. You work even during the holidays? I do, I said simply. It matters to me. Sophie appeared next, tying her robe, face polite but strained. Leaving so soon? She asked. Yes, thank you for having me, I said genuinely. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. Of course. We sat for breakfast, eggs, toast, and fruit, but it was quieter than yesterday. No excited chatter, no kids bouncing in and out. Even the dog seemed subdued. Finally, Ethan set down his fork and sighed. Mom. About yesterday. I looked at him calmly. Yes? You caught us off guard. I mean, all of it, the business, the condo, the income, I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said gently, the same way I had said it yesterday. He nodded slowly, shame flickering across his face. You're right. I didn't. I guess I just assumed you were, retired, keeping busy with small hobbies. I smiled faintly. I am retired. But retirement doesn't mean invisible. It doesn't mean done. Sophie cleared her throat. Caroline, I wanted to apologize. For how distant I've been. I set down my tea and met her eyes. Thank you for saying that. She fiddled with her napkin. I think I didn't know how to include you. You always seemed fine on your own, and I thought maybe you wanted space. I didn't want space, I said softly. But I learned to live with it. And now, I'm good, truly. My granddaughter walked in then, already dressed, hair up in a messy bun. Granny, can I ride back with you to Madison? I've got a week before school starts, and I want to see your studio and learn how you do your designs. Sophie opened her mouth, maybe to object, but Ethan gave her a quick look. She closed it again and nodded. My heart warmed. I'd love that, sweetheart. We'll make it a little road trip. After breakfast, I grabbed my suitcase and coat. The whole family stood in the doorway, Sophie hugging her robe close, Ethan with his hands in his pockets, the kids lingering behind. Drive safe, Mom, Ethan said, giving me an awkward armed hug. I will. Sophie gave me a polite hug, too. Merry Christmas, Caroline. Merry Christmas, I replied. As I stepped outside, my granddaughter whispered, This is going to be fun. She jogged to grab her bag, and we loaded everything into my car. The drive back to Madison was quiet at first, the hum of the tires filling the space. After a while, she turned to me. Granny, you kind of shocked them. I smiled. I noticed. They didn't expect you to be, well, kind of a boss. I chuckled. I'm not a boss, sweetheart. I just found something I love doing and I worked hard for it. She grinned. That's kind of the definition of a boss. I laughed. Maybe so. The rest of the drive, we talked about design, writing, building something from scratch. I showed her how to use Canva on my laptop at a rest stop, and she caught on quickly. By the time we pulled into my driveway 6 hours later, she had already sketched an idea for her own printable journal. You're really going to teach me all of it? She asked as we carried bags inside. Every bit I know, I said. That evening, after she settled into my guest room, I checked my email. There were dozens of new responses to my Christmas post. Women writing about how they, too, had been forgotten by family, how they felt invisible, and how my story made them feel seen. One message stood out. You reminded me I'm not done yet. Thank you for lighting a fire under me. I closed my laptop and sat quietly in the living room, candlelight flickering against the walls. For years, I had waited for Ethan and Sophie to invite me back into their world. I had begged for space at their table, for a sign that I mattered. And yesterday, I finally understood. I didn't need their table, I had built my own. That night, my granddaughter came out of the guest room holding her laptop. Granny, I want to write a blog too. Can you help me start it? I smiled. Of course, but first, tea. We brewed chamomile and sat side by side at the kitchen table, her excitement radiating like sunlight. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not just peace, but purpose tied to family. Back in Nashville, I imagined Sophie and Ethan sat in their own quiet, maybe thinking about the woman they thought they knew. Maybe they'd ask themselves why they hadn't noticed I was gone long before I ever left. But that was their work to do, not mine. My work was here, in Madison, in this house, at this table with a granddaughter eager to learn, and a community of women who had already found hope in what I built. And as I poured tea for both of us, I realized this was the Christmas I'd been waiting for all along. The next morning in Madison felt like a fresh start. My granddaughter, Lily, was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a half-finished journal template glowing on the screen. Her hair was tied up messily, and she wore one of my oversized sweatshirts like she owned the place. Granny, I stayed up late watching Canva tutorials, she said, eyes bright. Look, I made this cover design. What do you think? I looked over her shoulder. The design wasn't perfect, but it had heart-warm pastel colors, a soft floral pattern, and the words, "My first creative journal," in slightly crooked text. I smiled. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. A few tweaks here and there, but you've got the eye for it." She grinned, and something in my chest warmed in a way I hadn't felt in years. For most of the day, we sat together at the dining table. I showed her how I organized product ideas, scheduled emails, and managed customer messages. She caught on quickly, taking notes like a sponge. At one point, she paused, looking at me curiously. "Granny, why didn't you tell anyone about this sooner?" I shrugged. "Because it was mine. After your grandpa died, I spent so much time waiting for calls, invitations, some sign I still mattered. But one day, I decided I wouldn't wait anymore. I started small, and it grew. I guess I was afraid if I told people too soon, they'd make me doubt it. Or worse, they'd try to take it from me." Her expression softened. "Like Dad and Mom yesterday?" I nodded gently. "A little like that. They weren't being cruel. They just didn't understand. People often don't see your value until it's obvious in numbers." Lily closed her laptop slowly. "I see you, Granny. Even if no one else did." I smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." Over the next few days, we built her first digital product together, a simple self-reflection journal aimed at teens. She wrote the prompts herself, thoughtful and creative. "What made you laugh today? What's one thing you're proud of this week?" Watching her work reminded me of myself when I first started, nervous but eager, wondering if anyone would care. We also filmed a short video tutorial together for my online mentoring group, Second Chapter Circle, a small community I had started for women over 60 who wanted to learn digital skills. When Lily introduced herself to the group on Zoom, the women cheered her on. One woman, Joan from Oregon, said, "Caroline, I wish I'd had a grandma like you showing me how to do this when I was Lily's age." I laughed. "Better late than never, Joan. That's why we're all here." That week, I realized something. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building legacy. Legacy isn't money or houses. It's knowledge, resilience, and the ability to pass something meaningful forward. And now, I was passing it on to someone in my own family. On Lily's last night before heading back to Nashville, we sat on the porch, sipping cocoa as snow fell quietly in the streetlights. "Granny," she said softly, "I don't want to go back yet." I smiled. "Why not?" "Because it feels different here. Like I can actually breathe. And you make me feel like I can do something big, too." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You can do something big. But it doesn't have to look like mine. It just has to be yours." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you think Mom and Dad will ever understand? Like, really understand?" I thought about Sophie's stiff smile and Ethan's awkward glances at the report. Maybe. People change, but usually slower than we want them to. And sometimes, they don't at all. But that doesn't mean you stop being who you are. When we hugged goodbye at the bus station the next morning, she slipped me a folded piece of paper. "Open it later," she whispered. When I got home, I unfolded it to find a note. "Thank you for being my safe place. I love you." I pressed it to my chest, tears welling. For years, I had begged silently for my family to see me. To really see me. And now, one of them finally had. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Mom, can we talk this weekend? Just us?" I stared at it for a moment before typing back. "Yes, Sunday works." Sunday afternoon, Ethan called. He sounded nervous at first, but then words tumbled out. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything. About how I pulled away after Dad died. I think I just didn't know how to handle it. And Sophie, Well, she has her own way of dealing with things, but I let it create distance. That's on me. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. I'm sorry, he said finally. I don't want us to be like that anymore. I don't want to just call once a year. I want you to be part of our life again. And I want the kids to really know you. I breathed deeply, steady, and calm. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. He hesitated. Are you mad at me? No, I said softly. I'm not mad. I'm just clear. Clear about who I am now and what I need. I don't chase people anymore, even family. If you want to be in my life, you have to show up. That's all. He paused, then said, I will. After the call, I sat by my window, the same window where I used to wait for calls that never came, and smiled. This time, the call came to me. That evening, I drafted my next blog post. Legacy is who you teach, not what you leave. I wrote about Lily, about teaching her to build something from scratch, about seeing someone believe in themselves for the first time. And when I hit publish, the comments started pouring in again. I needed this reminder. Thank you for making me believe it's not too late. I'm showing this to my granddaughter. This wasn't just my second chapter anymore. It was turning into a shared chapter. One I hadn't expected to write, but was grateful for every word of it. Snow fell softly outside my Madison window, blanketing the street in silence. I sat at my desk with a cup of chamomile tea, my laptop open to a blinking cursor. It was late evening, but I didn't feel tired. Lily had left earlier that morning to catch her bus back to Nashville. We hugged so tightly at the station, like we were both afraid to let go of something we'd finally found. I had slipped one of my journals into her backpack, blank pages, ready to hold her own ideas and dreams. Now the house was quiet again. But it didn't feel empty. Not anymore. I opened my drafts folder and scrolled to the one I had started writing on Christmas Eve. Before everything happened, the gift I gave myself. I read the first line aloud. Sometimes the best gift isn't under the tree. It's the one you give yourself when no one else remembers to. My eyes softened. That was still true. Maybe more true now than ever. I began typing, letting the words flow. I thought I came to Nashville this Christmas to reconnect with my family. What I didn't expect was to reconnect with myself. I expected warmth and cheer, but found the same distance I had known for years. For a moment, it stung. But then, I reached into my purse not for tissues, but for proof of who I had become. I gave myself the gift of confidence. For years, I waited for someone to notice me, to invite me, to make me feel like I mattered. But I learned something. You can't wait for someone else to give you permission to live. When my son and his wife overlooked me yet again, I didn't shrink this time. I stood tall and said, "This is who I am now." And that moment gave me something no wrapped present ever could. Peace. The truth is, I didn't need their approval. What I needed was to show up for myself. And I did. Asterisk. I paused, wiping away tears I hadn't expected. They weren't sad tears. They were the kind that come when you realize you made it through. That afternoon, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Mom, Lily hasn't stopped talking about you. She's already working on her own journal designs. I just wanted to say thank you for teaching her. For teaching me, really." I smiled at the screen and typed back, "Thank you for letting her come. I'm proud of her and I'm proud of you for reaching out." His reply came quickly. "I know I was distant before. I don't want to be that way anymore. Can we plan a visit soon? Just the four of us. No holidays? No distractions?" "Yes," I typed. Later that evening, I checked my website analytics. The Christmas Eve post I'd published before leaving for Nashville had gone viral. Over 50,000 views in 3 days. Hundreds of comments poured in. "I thought I was the only one left out this year. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." This made me cry in the best way. "I'm going to start my own blog tomorrow. Your words saved me tonight." I felt invisible. But now, I feel seen. I sat back and let out a slow breath. A few years ago, I had sat in this same spot, staring out this same window, wondering if life had anything left for me. And now, people across the country were telling me I'd given them hope. That was the real gift. The following week, Lily called after school. "Granny, guess what? My first journal sold 10 copies already." 10! I laughed. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. How does it feel?" "Like I can actually do this," she said breathlessly. "Like I don't have to wait for someone to tell me I'm ready." "Exactly," I said softly. A few days later, Sophie sent me an email. I hesitated before opening it, expecting it to be another pitch to collaborate. Instead, it read, "Caroline, I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix it overnight, but I want to do better. I want the kids to know their grandmother, not just see her at Christmas. Thank you for being patient when I wasn't." It was simple, maybe even awkward. But it was a start. Spring rolled in quietly, and with it came new beginnings. I launched a mentorship guide for older women starting businesses, something my followers had been asking for. I also began planning a small retreat in Asheville, a place filled with memories of John and my early years, now ready to hold new ones. Ethan visited in March, just him and Lily this time. We cooked dinner together, laughed more easily than we had in years, and even planned a family hike for summer. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was honest. On a bright April morning, I sat by my window again, notebook open. I thought about the woman I had been just a few years ago, lonely, waiting by this same window for calls that never came. And I thought about the woman I was now. Confident, purposeful, connected. For decades, I'd measured my worth by how much space I took up in other people's lives. This year, I finally gave myself permission to create my own space. I closed my notebook and whispered, "Thank you, Caroline," like I was thanking another person entirely. Maybe, in a way, I was thanking the version of myself that chose to stand up, build something new, and stop waiting. Because that was the greatest gift I'd ever given myself, my own life back.